Hi, I'm Feroz Khan, and welcome to Drag and Drop Low Code Unplugged, the podcast where we explore the game changing impact of low code in software development. Join me in insightful conversations with IT leaders and passionate low code enthusiasts who are at the forefront of this digital evolution. Together, we'll explore how early adoption of low code is giving businesses a competitive edge on a global scale. We'll discuss its impact on software development, dissect its role in transforming businesses, and uncover the ways in which it's reshaping career trajectories. So whether you're a seasoned IT professional or a curious enthusiast, be sure to tune in as we share success stories and unravel the mysteries of low code. Subscribe now and stay tuned for a front row seat to the revolution that's shaping the future of technology. So let's go. Hi Don, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for agreeing to be a guest on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to I think I've seen you here and there on LinkedIn, so it's good to have you on. Obviously, you were referred to me, so then I definitely had to have you on, because the feedback I got about you, and I think it'd be interesting for people to hear what you have to say about low code and OutSystems. But for those who may not know who you are, it'd be good for you to give a little introduction about yourself, who you are, where you're from.
Who am I? Where am I from? Well, my name's Don Monpas. I currently am from Minnesota, and I've been working in OutSystems since 2017. I think that was when I was introduced to it. So some personal stuff about me. It would be married. My wife is a nurse practitioner. We've got two kids, 5 and 7. They keep me incredibly busy and they're incredibly curious, and I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
For example, I just bought them a bunch of worms. They've been asking for a pet. I'm like,
Oh,
let's get
wow.
100 of them. We'll do some worms and we'll do some composting. And so
Yeah.
now this is week 2, and it doesn't stink and nothing has died, so we're doing well. But
Cool.
it's also warming up. So
Yeah.
biking season's here. I like to bike. My kids and I, we do playground pub crawls where we have like 8 or 9
Nice.
playgrounds we can bike to, and
That's a
then
really
after
cool
that,
idea,
camping
actually.
all summer. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I
It
like
keeps it interesting because you go to a
yeah.
playground, there's no other kids there. You know you're only
Mm,
there for like 10, 15 minutes, and then you're
yeah.
on to the next.
Yeah.
And
I like,
so,
I've got 3 kids, so I'll definitely have to take that idea. I think that's a good
yeah,
idea.
find where all the parks are, get a
Yeah,
bike trail or
exactly.
bike path
Yeah.
down, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Love
it
it.
keeps them busy too. And then hopefully they're tired by the time you're done.
Yeah, exactly. Love it. Love it. So, just going, into your career, it'd be good to kind of start, like you said, you introduced OutSystems in 2017, but obviously you had a career prior to that. So it'd be good to kind of talk a bit about kind of where you started. Um, I saw you were
Sure.
kind of working in a BA type of analyst type of role.
Yep.
So can you kind of talk me through what made you get into that, and then how did it lead into you being exposed to OutSystems?
It's going to date myself, but back in 2002 when I was in college, there's this like, no, this, you're going to be a BA or you're going to be a programmer. So I chose the programming route. I did that for 2 years. I landed myself an internship at Menards, 40 hours a week, work as much as you want. All you're doing is coding. And I didn't want to do that the rest of my life because I like both. I like doing
Yeah,
both and I wanted to do both, but college didn't offer both. They offered you have the information systems or the
yeah,
analysis degree, or you have the programming degree. And then my advisor was like, don't double major. I'm like, okay. So I
yeah,
went with the analysis. But the funny thing is when you graduate with an information analysis degree and you're like, all right, I'm gonna be the best BA ever. A BA with programming experience never stays a BA. And that's what
yeah.
happened in every single job I ever had after that. Is you go in, you get hired, like United Health Group. I worked there as a claims processor. Provider submits a claim, it fails, we fix it. I know how to program though.
Yeah,
So then I ended up programming there pretty much full time as well. Like even though my title was claims processor, I was
yeah.
developing code to make everyone else faster. I think I supported like 100 or 200 people, and we had to work with a mainframe. My coding wasn't at the mainframe; it was with the terminal to make people faster. And so scraping data off the screen that they don't need to memorize, like a 13-digit UFI code. Like now you write that, you save that in memory, and then you just push a
Yeah,
button and it just types it in wherever they need it. So just lots of programming
yeah.
afterwards. And so go from Menards to United Health Group. And then when I graduated college, I went into like a contractor. So I
Mhm.
worked for Genesis 10, which is, I got into Prime Therapeutics, and Did some QA work there, but again, some more programming. Actually,
Mm.
surprisingly, the same kind of dummy terminal as United Health Group uses. And
Yeah.
so it was pretty easy
Yeah.
to like write code for that terminal because I already
Yeah.
knew it. But then I worked at Thrivent. So through Genesis 10, I started at Thrivent and I ended up being there just shy of 10 years, about
Yeah.
9 years, 10 months, something
Mm.
like that.
Yeah.
And that's where my skill set grew massively.
Mm.
My first project there was splitting a trust in a bank. So not only are you doing all the information technology, building VM servers and that type of thing, setting up like private connections to external parties because everything's got to be
Mm.
secure. But I also did uh, MG Alpha is what it's called, so the admin for compute. And so
Yep.
like, what's a better way to say this? The you'd have a mathematical model submitted by an
Yeah.
actuary, and it could run for a week on a computer. And so what we've set up is like 700 CPUs on this grid. MG Alpha was what ran it, and I would have to manage how much compute time we're using, and is there a better way to use those resources? Because you have a big models and small models.
Mm.
Like most users of any system, like 5% of your users use 90% of the resources. That's
Yeah.
that's generally holds true. Like you have your
Yeah.
power users who just consume everything, and then you have users that are just in and out for a little bit. And so I did a lot of that. And where programming came into place there is when you have 700 compute cores and something goes wrong, we had 700 log files. So how do you know which one failed and where and why? And so this was a lot of log analysis type programming that I did there.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that was a lot of my time up to about 2017, and that was when I was introduced to OutSystems. We had a different group that bought the product, was working in it already. And my boss was like, "Hey, take a look at this, see what you think." And I was like, "Yeah, it's all right. You can build a website in like 5 minutes, which is great,
Yeah.
faster than I could build one
Yeah.
if you said go build me a website."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I initially wasn't super impressed because I felt some of the control you had was gone.
Mm.
But I didn't, you don't know the depth of technology when
Yeah.
it's just like on the surface. And
Yeah.
so in like 2017, 2018, I got on a project called Thrivent Student Resources. It was a nonprofit just teaching people how to pay for college because it's a huge problem in the States.
Mm.
And I love that project, and I learned a lot about OutSystems, and its extensibility makes me kind of eat my words about it. Yeah, it's all right in
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
beginning,
Yeah.
but you
Yeah.
could, if you had a problem, you could solve it by just building something for it. And to this, on that entire project and on my entire tenure at Thrivent, we never had to create anything that wasn't already available. And so that was really convenient with the
Yeah.
Forge and stuff like that.
Mm.
So that's what kind of kept me at
Yeah.
OutSystems with
Yeah.
OutSystems.
Yeah, yeah. And when you kind of obviously you'd been coding for a while, and then you kind of like you said you tried it, you liked it, and it kept you. Did you ever kind of did you think as soon as you kind of had done the project and you enjoyed it, did you yourself think, okay, well this is I'm going to now follow this like because obviously you've been coding, right? So you could say, okay, when I finish, eventually I might go back into coding, or did you kind of were you that kind of impressed with the platform you thought I'm going to pursue a career as an OutSystems developer?
I still code all the time.
Okay. Yeah.
I write Python. I do all that stuff. So I get to do that stuff.
Yeah.
So I didn't I've never had to make that distinction because
Yeah.
the code plus the BA, I am more in the coding side of things, the infrastructure, the
Mm.
architecture, rather than BA work. But that knowledge never really left because
Mm.
the BA work is when I write something, how does it impact the entire stack? An example of this is we wanted to just like when you see a form, uh, so, so now I work at Wodify. So on Wodify,
Yeah.
if you were to go look at the sign-in screen and you don't fill in the username password, we want that button to look disabled. It's not
Mm.
disabled, but it looks that way because you haven't completed the mandatory fields. So I was asked, how do you write JavaScript to work on every page and make that happen? So how do you find every button on every single page, one piece of code? So I was able to do that, but my fear was what happens if we disabled that button and we didn't want to? And so I wanted to be able to disable that code. So this is where the impact part comes in. so we wrote a site property, which is an environment variable in OutSystems that just says, is it on or off?
Mm.
And the impact of that, so the BA side, a programmer probably just write that and be done with it because you're like, oh yeah, you just check it. It's
Yeah.
instant. It's so fast. It's cached. It's readily available. But with our user base, we call that 4.5 million times an hour. So
Wow.
I was
Wow.
like, oh, we need to get rid of that. So
Yeah.
that's kind of like where the two marry each other is I can do the coding, but then I'm like, oh, I don't want to keep that around forever because I know the
Yeah.
impact of that. Why call something 4.5 million times?
Yeah.
Even if it's fast, it's under 100 milliseconds every time. 4.5 million times an hour really
Yeah.
adds up in compute time,
Yeah.
I guess you could say. And so I never had to separate those two, and
Yeah.
I still to this day don't.
Yeah. That's amazing. And then you obviously moved on to CDR. Um,
Yep.
how did you, before obviously your current role, how did you kind of find the transition of working for an end customer to then moving into a consulting business?
The decision was made for me because
Okay.
Thriven wanted to get out of OutSystems, and not because they didn't like OutSystems. They had an entire rebranding that went on right before COVID. So they went from their traditional reds and black, and they went to like a black and gold theme. And
Mm.
then internally, we the whole company wanted just very few pieces of coding. And their backbone, the most work they've ever that almost all of their product works on is a JavaScript stack. So my decision
Mm.
was stick with OutSystems and go find a new company, or move back to traditional JavaScript coding. And that to me was a no-brainer. I didn't want to, I felt like that was a step back. So
Yeah.
now you kind of know what my opinion of OutSystems is
Yeah.
compared to
Yeah.
them. We write plenty of JavaScript. So
Yeah.
if you like JavaScript, that's fine. But this is Java. I should have, at the Spring Stack, if that
Yeah.
helps some developers, not JavaScript. And so
Yeah.
that was my decision point. And so one of the guys I worked with introduced me to CDR. They weren't hiring at the time, but I got an interview anyway, which was great. And
Yeah.
then I was able to start up there. And
Yeah. Yeah.
that was that tenure there was great. I learned
Yeah.
a lot about mobile development.
Mm. Yeah. And did you kind of, did you feel a difference, working for a partner versus you were the end client? Did you feel any difference, or was it just kind of for you same? Because obviously you're working on end customer projects, but you tend to obviously work on multiple projects. So
Mhm.
what I mean is, do you feel when you're working for a consulting partner, if you've got that experience, because you're working on multiple projects, it can also help you learn so many different things?
Yeah. So growth in a partner experience is vast because you work on many projects. I would also say you're held to a higher standard, and maybe not everyone feels that way, but I know when I wrote work on a piece of code or a project, when I leave that project, someone else has to support it. And I always feel
Mm.
that if you didn't do your best work as a partner and deliver like the best code possible, someone else is holding the bag, and I never want to be in a position where someone's really angry with that. So I feel
Yeah.
like there's a lot of stress with that as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
you get but what helps you handle it is because you've been on a lot of projects, you have a lot of experience on other people's issues.
Yeah.
So this a client has a problem with mobile, a different client has a problem with just processing millions of records, like very different issues. So you get that exposure, and you can bring that experience from your team too. Your whole
Mm.
team, the greater team, I should say, like the whole company, everyone runs into different issues. So we chat quite a bit internally about what problems people have seen on their projects. Can people help each other out? I really, really enjoyed that environment.
Yeah. Yeah. And last year you joined Wodify.
Yep.
And they're obviously an end customer for OutSystems. Can you, even though you joined last year, can you tell us a bit about, um, they've been using OutSystems for a while. What was their kind of reason for switching to low code, um, all those years back?
I think they started on low code.
Okay.
The history, like the
Yeah.
company's 10 or 11 years old, and they
Yeah.
started there
So they went straight in
because
with low code.
yeah, they did.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
And a lot of the products they chose were because you could start up that project and just, like, for example, use Cloudinary. You just throw an image at them and they handle resizing, delivery. So like when you don't have a huge team, OutSystems plus some of these other products really make it easy to get something off the ground, like what Wodify did. You want a mobile app and you don't know how to program in for Apple Swift or an Android, or how do you build an APK versus the iOS one? You don't know how to do these things. OutSystems shortens that stack substantially. Like you learn in OutSystems, if you know how to program in the reactive stack, which is the latest stuff for
Yep.
just web browser, you know how to code in mobile. Even if you don't want to work with local storage, you can still make a mobile app and then just talk to the server every time. But then that barrier of entry is just so low.
Yeah.
So that's where I think, or why a
Yeah.
lot of I
Yeah.
chose OutSystems.
Yeah. And, in the kind of time they've been, using low code and even your personal kind of experience with the platform, what are some things, that you could, there's always releases, there's always new features coming out for the platform to make it better
Mhm.
for the developer experience and the customer experience. What are some things that, you've experienced that, has made your job easier and you've kind of thought, yeah, this is definitely, going to help me in my day to day and also the customer?
I think from like when you code, we always have technical debt. So something that
Mm.
helps a lot is knowing when you've introduced something. So their architecture dashboard. I have a love-hate relationship because it yells at you a lot for things that may be out of your control. Like I didn't
Yeah.
program this, but it's yelling at me anyway because it was someone else.
Yeah.
Uh, that's really good about handling technical debt. It reports on everything, and some things are a non-issue. Like, oh, you're requesting every database, every record out of the database. And you're like, oh, but there's only ever going to be one. So it'll tell you that, and then it helps keep your code just that much better, I
Mm.
suppose. Both instances, whether you said only get one record or just fetch all of them and only one's going to come back, it just kind of keeps your documentation. So when you're reading the code in OutSystems, it does improve it.
Mm.
And
Mm.
so
Okay.
I really like that feature.
Yeah.
If I had to
Yeah.
pick one.
And
Pipeline
and
management is also pretty good.
okay, do you want to tell us a bit about that as well?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
when you have, we have four environments, dev, test, stage, production. Moving code between the two is all done through Lifetime, and it's just a button click. Promote dev to test, and then you pick the
Yeah.
apps you want to go. And so if you only need to send one app, you can. And if you want to send all
Okay.
your apps, you can. And it just figures it out. If you send, several hundreds of things, it will take a few hours, but in the end, it's generally going to be fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Amazing. And something that's being talked about a lot, in the past year, probably, and across all technologies, obviously AI, and
Yep.
OutSystems are releasing, everyone's talking about AI, right? And is that something that the business is looking into or you're personally looking into adding to your skill set?
I when GPT first like dropped the bomb of here you go. I went out
Yeah.
and used it, and it's one of those things is going to change the landscape. Uh, AI, I was actually leading a lot of the AI work that we did at eMids with how do you give this to users? And
Mm.
there's a lot of issues with just opening it up like that. I don't think a lot of people can implement just add AI and it's going to be fine.
Yeah.
We have issues like prompt injection where the user, you'll see
Yeah.
screenshots of users talk. I think it was on Ford or something, but they're getting the AI bot to talk about Tesla being so much better or
Yeah.
something like that. And like,
Yeah.
so like, there's a lot of considerations for just
Mm.
adding AI to something, but I like it more as an assistant than someone who does work.
Mm.
Like, hey, I need to create a description for this app, and I'm a programmer. I'm not someone who is marketing. It does
Yeah,
a great
sure.
job of creating descriptions for you. And if you don't
Yeah.
like it, you just keep telling it, oh no, this is too wordy. This is not wordy enough. So I
Yeah.
like it at
Yeah.
that point. It's
Yeah.
also really good at you can throw some code at and be like, document this or add
Yeah.
comments, and it'll do
Yeah.
really well there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there are instances where if you're a junior dev, I think it's more detrimental to rely on it too heavily because they don't often know what something needs to look like at the end. How should it perform? An example of this would be I had AI write, I was trying to create a little app for my daughter. It's Hangman. So
Yeah.
you had to
Okay.
spell the word and you'd use the pen on the screen.
Yeah.
So I had it right because I knew there's code out there and I could have went out and found it. but working with a browser canvas so we could draw and paint. We're going to paint
Yeah.
characters on the screen, letters, because she's going to do
Yeah.
Hangman.
Yeah.
And the AI wrote a great program, but it didn't know about this fourth component or the transparency. So nothing worked. And it
Oh,
wasn't
really?
until
Okay.
I fixed it, because for whatever reason, it knows the structure, but it didn't know that when you went to save the picture, to then I fed it to the Microsoft handwriting to detect the character she wrote.
Yeah.
Uh, everything was black because the
Okay.
transparency was 100%. So whatever you drew was just a black picture because it
Mm.
wasn't fixing that. So and it was a very complicated issue because we're storing the color, the pathing, and all this stuff in that image, and AI couldn't get through that. And so a junior developer might write that and be like, okay, it's busted, and they spend a week on it because
Yeah.
the one component that the AI assumes it knows everything because it
Yeah.
presents itself that way, like this is the right answer. You have to be very cognizant of what is right or what is the expectation at the end.
Yeah. They need to understand the full picture of what's behind it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't know I'm feeding it to Microsoft afterwards. Be
Yeah.
like, what did this person write on the screen? Because we're
Yeah.
taking pixels from a drawing and then saying, what's the handwriting?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. That's very interesting. And since you've been kind of using the platform, and there's so many, like I said earlier, there's so many new features always coming out and to make the platform better. But is there something or some things in the platform that, still for you sorry, that's not in the platform that for you kind of can be a frustration that, if it's not already there or in the pipeline that you wish was there to kind of help you in your day-to-day role?
Yeah, and there is a couple of things.
Yeah.
One of them would just be, I think a lot of developers really like branching. So if you want version control, branching is super nice. I with the current like versioning architecture, because you can publish something, let's say in a core module, and you've got business logic, widgets, UI, everything that's dependent on it changes. And so having branching would be amazing. I don't know how they would implement it though,
Mm.
because we store the binary of every publish, so you'd have to have this like whole collection of things going on. But that would be awesome because
Yeah.
there's I've seen a lot of different solutions to this. One is having two dev environments. So you
Mm.
program in one dev environment, start promoting that up to production, but while it's going to production in that next release, you just switch over to the other one. So that requires some cloning that goes on. So you copy over that current one to the next one. So then you save that version if you wanted to. They also have solutions. So you could just take a solution, but that's a current snapshot. You can't have two dev paths. And
Mm.
so if you have a feature that takes a month to develop because it's very complicated, uh, you have to write it in a way that doesn't impact production. Usually it could be behind a feature flag, or because this code is
Mm.
going to have to go with all the other code to production if it's within the main app. And so a branch would be super nice there.
Yeah.
Live architecture notifications would be good. Like
Okay.
if your IDE was connected to the architecture, we have someone that just checks it every single day. Like, is there a
Mm.
violation? Because because OutSystems allows you to just copy paste stuff, it can bring along references with it, even if they're not used. OutSystems is like, oh, you want this because we used it in the app you copied it from. And so that can be it would be nice to be like, hey, this is going to create a side to side reference, upward reference.
Yeah.
That integration would be super nice.
Yeah. And do you know if any of this is in the pipeline or not as yet?
I don't think so. I don't,
No. Okay.
because the AI mentor is an
Yeah.
OutSystems product run on OutSystems. And so
Mm.
the probes submit the data and then it's calculated. It's a lag indicator, I guess, or it's,
Mm.
runs behind. And so the live one would be, I think the IDE would have to also know what that thing's processing, and that might
Sure.
just be too big.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, I don't know
Sure.
the status of that.
Okay, interesting. And in the time you've been working with OutSystems, can you talk us through one or two, most interesting projects you've been involved in?
I do three.
Three's fine. Yeah, three's good. Go for it.
Two kind of small ones and a big.
Okay, go for it.
So I'll go through Wodify's
Yeah.
first. They let me do this little passion project of mine. I've wanted to write this for years for OutSystems, and it's an AppDex log analysis. And so when we look at OutSystems default reporting, it'll say what SQL queries are slow. It'll give you the average, the mean, the total time spent, and that's great. But when we're at runtime, at any given hour of the day, when you average stuff for a day or within, whatever that frequency is that you're averaging, it doesn't give you like there was an outage visual. And so I started on Thanksgiving weekend on my time because it's my
Okay.
project. I want to get this
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
I started writing this log app deck. So when we look at 6 different logs, you got slow SQL, slow extension. There's also service actions, the extensions, and I'm forgetting the 6th one. Oh no, I'm on the spot here. Probably the API call. Does that have? There's 6. I know there's 6.
Okay.
Let's go with that.
Yeah.
Since slow SQL and slow extension all report in the logs that this query or extension ran longer than 200 milliseconds, I think that's the barrier to get on the log saying,
Yeah.
hey, this is, starting to get slow. It also reports the entry module. So what's really hard about writing a service app that 10 things call is they all run the same query, but at runtime, one user may have 1,000 records, another user might have 1 record. So when you average these things, it's really hard to say like, oh,
Yeah.
well, in the mobile app, it runs, AppDex of 100, which means it runs within expectations all the time, within half a second, let's say. But then in this other app, it runs really slow. And then when we average them together, like, hey, your SQL's slow. But it's not necessarily telling you that, oh, because of the entry point, maybe we need to address something over there. So that's what this does, is
Sure.
it says what module it ran in, with like the entry point, and what query it was. And because we have reactive screens, that's my 6th one, reactive screens.
Reactive screens. Okay, cool.
That's the
We
last
got there.
log, the most important log, I would
Yeah.
argue, because reactive screens is also mobile screens. And so when we have users saying something slow, I can argue that no, nothing is slow because when we look at the holistic view, we're at almost that 100, right where we want to be. We're at like 97, 98. And what is slow for users is going to be a small sliver of that. And so when we look at the week, and you look at Monday, our busiest day for CrossFitters or anyone working out, everyone works out Monday night.
Yeah.
We'll see a dip because there's so many users. It's our Black Friday event essentially of the week.
Yeah.
What can we do to improve that? So that's what this allows us to look at, and we're still building this out some more. Now we have follow-up processes of like, how do we take that event and identify what is the most costly function we're doing or run that impacts everyone. And so I really enjoy that project. And I said it was going to be quick, but that one there.
That's good. That's good. Details good.
The other one, I'll make this one quick, is Firebase.
Yeah.
I really enjoy working with Firebase. So document storage in Google. Right now I'm working on notifications on device, the pesky things that say, hey, someone liked your comment, that type of stuff.
Okay.
Not everyone appreciates having 1,000 notifications, but luckily you can turn them off. But working on that has been it's been kind of eye-opening on how tall the stack is from that notification service in Firebase to on-device components, to using the OutSystems code to use those components to talk to Firebase to get a notification. And the fact that I'll send a test notification to my 2 phones and they're there within half a second, I really like that. And I want to explore that a lot more.
Yeah,
And
that's very impressive.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to using Firestore, which is going to be that live analytics. If someone signed into a class, we'll show them up like if we can do it within a half second, that's going to be awesome. And that's the target of my next work here. And the third project I want to talk about was when I first got into mobile, and I actually did 2 presentations at OutSystems conferences for this, would be mobile synchronization. So how do you ensure that a device has all of the data it needs to work when it doesn't have internet connectivity? And this app that I worked on, it's for a client, and it was meant to save people's lives. So we would have people in these giant metal buildings, no reception, which is the offline capability.
Yeah.
And they would be welding in chlorine. And so how do you keep that person safe? So they've developed this app that has all these permitting things of like, what are all the things you're going to do? If you're doing welding work, then you have to have someone stay behind for 2 hours to make sure a fire doesn't start.
Yeah.
And so I really enjoyed that app because you can't make a mistake on your synchronization. There are pictures, images, and controls that had to be put in place to protect people. And how do you ensure that's fast, it's accurate? And that's where those presentations I gave was on the synchronization pattern we used. How do we make this fast? How do we make it accurate? And I'm I really enjoyed that project a lot. It was a huge learning experience for me,
Yeah.
developing a sync pattern that wasn't um, wasn't the one they teach you out of the box, which is you have
Yeah.
an integer, you go find a new one and on the server, and then all of that was really challenging. And
Yeah. Yeah. I
so
could imagine.
I was really happy with what I came up with there.
Yeah. Yeah. And how long did that kind of take you to build that?
I rewrote the synchronization code and the patterning. There's actually a Forge component I created. So if you're
Ah,
actually
cool.
interested in it, there is a Forge component out there. And I rewrote that all. It took me a couple weeks, about 80 hours worth of work. And the basis of it was, instead of sync units, which we still have if you do phone development or you're an OutSystems developer watching
Mm.
this, they're still there. But I use more of an atom molecule. So an atom would be all of the work to take one table and move it over. And then you'd build these molecules that you, because we have like 40, 50 database tables, some with images, some with controls, all that stuff, you'd call a whole molecule. You say, I need all of this data because they're all related. And then you would start, I guess your molecule would be your sync unit equivalent, where you don't just call one table anymore. You say all of these are related to each other and they require each other to work, because we have foreign key references and
Yeah.
all of that on device. And so yeah, that's out there. There's
Okay.
a lot of it's designed to be like a Q&A
Mm.
in the patterning, because I don't have a video in the OutSystems
Yeah.
code.
Yeah.
Like you
Of course.
download it and then you just
Yeah.
go read and learn.
Yeah.
But that Q&A is like, what will happen if and it was like all of the problems I had making this thing like run really well. Like, how do you cache data?
Yeah.
Caching is so hard to do, because how do you freeze something that changes?
Yeah.
Because the moment you pull data down onto a device, someone else could have inserted a record. I think this app had 20,000 users, so that was almost guaranteed. You were out
Mhm.
of date the moment you talked to the server.
Yeah.
And can you be out of date? Yes, you can, because not everyone was. Only one person should be working on one permit for this, but and you can't infinitely just sit there and synchronize all day, otherwise you never get anything done. And
Yeah.
so that was the pattern's out there, and I really like it. And if anyone has a better pattern, I'll have a bake off.
Nice.
Because then I win. Because if you have a better pattern, I'm going to take it. I'm going to use
Yeah,
it. I'll credit
exactly.
you,
Yeah,
sure.
exactly.
But then everyone wins, because then we have the
Yeah.
synchronization code of
Yeah.
getting data for your device, and it's fast.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
that's amazing. That's very amazing. And in the time you've been kind of working with OutSystems, I don't know if you've come across people, because obviously you've been coding in the past, or you're still coding, sorry, but you've had colleagues you've got a network of people who might work in tech. And I think even with the US, I think the
mhm.
the pool of candidates, the growth side is a lot slower than Europe, right? So the pool of candidates in OutSystems and low code as a whole isn't that big, and so what's your kind of message to those who may still not think, I don't want to learn OutSystems or low code. I'm gonna, it's not a thing. It's only for building small apps, internal apps, and if you've got a conversation you've had, or if you haven't, but what would be your message to kind of those people who really still don't believe that, low code can compete with traditional development?
Ooh, that's a lot to unpack. So let's say you have a talented candidate and they don't know your stack. Almost they never will. That's any organization I've ever worked with. I've never gone and be like, oh, I know everything that you guys do, because
Yeah,
everyone, even if you're using the same Java, you're using the same .NET, there's going to be differences, version differences,
yeah,
extensibility, programming environment. What's your life cycle look like? What's your pipeline? How do you move code? GitHub or not? I don't. All of that
mm,
stuff changes, but What I have learned with OutSystems, and I've done some interviews for candidates for Wodify, is you find talent, really good talent. OutSystems, what I like about it is they are up and running pretty quickly. That 5 minute app builder is no joke. You can build an app in 5 minutes. Now, it's going to take months of onboarding because your environment is very challenging for someone to learn. What is process? How do you move a Jira card? What's code review look like? And even it's always been really easy to onboard someone because it takes care of a lot for you. OutSystems, you don't know how to build a database. You don't know how to write SQL queries to create a new table. We don't have that. You just build the entity within the studio and it creates the SQL script. So like for startup, just beginning, you have a lot of talent, but they don't have experience in database design, delivery, web apps, like even mobile. I started mobile not knowing mobile because OutSystems lowered that barrier of entry
Yeah.
substantially for me. And now I love it. So I'm
Yeah.
happy to work on it. So I wouldn't have had that opportunity. And I guess I could also leave you with, I used to have interns at Thrivent. And so
Mm.
we have this college exchange over the summer. We have interns come work. And I had an intern who did his entire capstone on traditional web. They built a web server. They had to make it secure, all this stuff. And he said at 2 weeks of being an intern with me, some tutelage, right? But
Yeah.
OutSystems was the backbone. He said he did more in 2 weeks than he did his entire capstone
Wow.
project with a team of 4. Now they're students and they're learning, so they don't know everything. But that's the exact point you're going to get some of your new hires. They come out of college, and you're like, well, we have OutSystems. I can guarantee, not guarantee, but the barrier of entry is going to be a lot lower
Yeah.
that I've seen than, hey, we use all of these low not they're high code
Yeah.
application stack, and
Yeah.
what's the impact of making this code change, or how do you update X, Y, and Z without breaking everything. OutSystems does a great job of also saying what you're going to break. Because if you
Yeah.
publish like a new mandatory dependency, like, oh, you need to provide the user ID before this web block will run. Everyone who consumes it breaks, and you know that. And so
Yeah. Yeah.
there's no like, oh yeah, we promoted a test and half the app doesn't work, or trying to get this integrated back was a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And kind of on the back of that, I think, what we've seen is obviously, I think a lot of customers in the US are open to OutSystems and low code, and it's really gaining traction. But I think the speed of what customers are adapting low code to the pool of candidates that are growing, kind of is quite small, right? So there's a lot of customers purchasing the platform, they're going to do low code. Why do you think the candidate base and people who are kind of developers from traditional or other backgrounds are not really kind of also adopting low code as part of their skill set? Do you think it's because traditional has just been the way everybody knows for such a long time, or it's a kind of the message hasn't been put across as much, kind of enough noise hasn't been made?
Coursework. So if you have a college graduate, they don't teach low code. They
Yeah.
want you're learning data structures, you're learning all the popular languages.
Mm.
Although Excel isn't included, and I hear that's the most popular.
Yeah, yeah,
But
exactly.
they come out knowing no, they come out knowing
Yeah.
a breadth of languages that will get them the most chance of landing a job.
Mm.
So that's why your OutSystems isn't brought into there. If you went to a technical college and you did a boot camp, they're also going to teach you coding basics, because I do find that that is more valuable because you can apply that to the OutSystems code
Yeah.
very easily. Something goes wrong, well, we're running in a web browser, we're running JavaScript. How can I fix my problem? CSS, for example, that's
Mm.
usable anywhere that has a front end. And so that's why your newest talent won't have that level of
Yeah.
expertise without systems.
Yeah, yeah. And do you like you said, do you feel people who have some traditional experience, and you can talk from experience, that allows you to be a better low code developer because you can understand both sides?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. If you are not a front end developer, OutSystems doesn't make you one. Uh, and you can program just fine. But the moment you start doing inline CSS, that's a bad practice. The architecture dashboard will yell at you for it,
Mm.
but you have to go
Yeah.
monitor the dashboard in order to be yelled at. And if you don't, you can make mistakes. But that can be done in any programming language. And so when I said the barrier of entry is lower, if you should know how to do some programming in
Yeah.
any language, and that's only going to be helpful if you're programming in OutSystems. But there are success stories of people who didn't know how to program,
Yeah.
took some boot camps, and I know you had an interview with
I've
Clark.
spoken to some. Yeah, Clark. Yeah.
Yeah, we had some personnel that were just admin staff, went and learned how to code, did some OutSystems training, and then was working on project work because they moved from admin to developer, and that's because they desired that. And so that barrier of entry, like if you were to start programming, front end, let's say that.
Yeah.
Uh, Someone else could support you on database creation, and you should always have like a tech lead or an architect help you with that anyway, because they're very important decisions, and a new developer probably shouldn't be making those.
Yeah.
Although you can, if you want to do the start up your own personal environment, go ahead, make
Yeah.
mistakes. I the number of times I've rewritten my own mobile app is probably, I think I'm on my
Yeah.
third rewrite of that because I'm
Yeah.
never happy with it, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I enjoy making mistakes and then fixing them on my own.
Yeah.
But when you're in a professional setting, I guess never make a mistake is
Yeah.
that's never going to happen. If you find someone that's never made a mistake, I'd like to hire them because they're worth millions.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
There's a lot of you
I,
don't know what you
yeah.
don't know,
Yeah.
and you also have the OutSystems support staff too. So if you have
Mm.
problems, submit a ticket, even if you're on
Yeah.
the free account. It's because you just
Yeah.
open it up OutSystems. They'll answer. It won't be the fastest because you're not paying anything, but they do answer. I go, hey,
Yeah.
why was my
Yeah.
environment brought down? Well, you're using too much CPU. I'm like, yeah, I probably shouldn't have wrote a time for that. I was testing. In my defense, I was testing how much faster bulk submission into a database was versus single record. And I used you can go to like a public government website and download all social security numbers or names, not
Okay.
numbers.
Yeah.
Dark
Yeah.
web, you might get the numbers.
Yeah.
I know we've had some data breaches, but you get the names and the year. So when I first started Reactive, I was building a chart with when names were used and most popular. And I need to insert 5.5 million records. And I started out at one at a time because, yeah, I will let it run.
Yeah.
It'll get done when it
Yeah.
gets done. And I was like, oh, it's only doing 200 records a second. And I was like, oh, God. And then I got kicked off for a day because the CPU must have went through the roof.
Yeah.
And then I went to bulk insertion, which is 20 to 30,000 records per second. And so, yeah, go make mistakes. You will, I'm sure of it. But
And
it's
you
what you
learn
learn
from them,
from.
don't you? You learn from, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. And now I know, bulk insertion's faster, but you got to make sure all your records are in order beforehand. So there's a trade-off.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. And, just the kind of final kind of question, just kind of around, what's your personal aspirations for the future? Is there something you're looking to add to your skill set, or, anything you're kind of looking forward to that you've got goals that you want to achieve?
Yeah, two things. I guess I could say two things. One is to finish
Mm.
my third redesign of my my own personal fitness app. I just have it in my personal environment.
Yeah.
I designed it after I don't know, maybe it dates me, but the last time I played Mario Kart, which was like 30
Oh,
years ago.
yeah.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
They had this
Yeah.
mode where you race your ghost. So you just go
Yeah.
faster and faster, and the
Yeah.
fastest lap you ever did, your ghost went that fast.
Yeah.
Well, it's in that same thing for fitness, but it was like if you want to do weightlifting, you set yourself to like 30 minutes and then you lift as much volume as you can,
Yeah.
whatever means possible. It's like full body, you and curls, bench, whatever you need to do, as much volume as you can. So on leg day, you compete with your last leg day on,
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever your goals are. And then, yeah, so I wanted to rebuild that, but this time have some server side stuff. I did all offline. Like I was like, this app is just for me. I don't need to do
Yeah.
anything on the server, but besides deliver the app. And that worked fine until my data gets wiped and then there's no backup on the server. And so I lose
Yeah.
everything. So I was like, all right, I'll have to do everything.
Yeah. You're gonna have to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, finish that thing. Or just keep working on it. I don't. And then the other thing is since I've recently been into the Firebase Cloud Store, I want to do more with that. Potentially look at what does synchronization across that as the medium because the scalability of Firebase is huge. I mean, we're just storing JSON documents and it's got the Google backbone, right? So if I needed to deliver to millions and millions of users updates, that's a really good way to do it. And so what does that
Yeah.
look like? So I'm going to play around with that. I don't have any ideas of what that's going to look like in the
Yeah.
end, but I really enjoy how fast it is. And
Yeah.
so we'll see how that goes.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time. It was really good to talk to you and hear your views and kind of your journey of where you've kind of started and where you've ended up. So I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was great. A lot of laughs here from my end, but
Yeah. And no, definitely. It's very interesting things you've done. And hopefully I'll see you in the future back on the stage presenting at one of the conferences.
yeah, I look forward to that. I do enjoy presenting. I always have something to talk about, but it takes about 6 to 9 months to go from acceptance to presenting.
Yeah.
So I will be looking to do that again. So hopefully I'll see you there.
Yeah. Amazing. Thanks for your time, Don.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode, which is brought to you by iTrack. We are a leading staffing firm that solely specializes in supplying both contract and permanent low-code professionals to organizations globally. Navigating the niche landscape of the low-code market requires the best talent, and we recognize its critical importance for our clients. Whether you're a company looking to strengthen your team, an individual seeking the next career move, or someone entirely new to the world of low-code, we're here for you. Our extensive experience and in-depth market knowledge enables us to quickly pinpoint the ideal candidates while offering expert advice and support at every stage of your low-code journey. Reach out to us through our website or connect with me directly on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to assist you. Thank you once again for joining us today. We'll be back next week with another insightful episode. Until then, take care.